They called him mad. But what if madness was just the excuse? This story begins with a king standing over a dark lake in Bavaria, stripped of power, declared insane by his own government, watched by a psychiatrist who had already signed his political death sentence. By morning, both men would be dead. No witnesses, no clear autopsy, no satisfying answers. But this wasn't just the end of a life. This was the final move in a quiet war, a war between fantasy and authority, between a monarch obsessed with building heaven on earth and ministers determined to stop him before he bankrupted the kingdom. He built castles that looked like dreams, but while he was chasing immortality in stone, powerful men were building something far more dangerous behind his back: a case, a diagnosis, a removal. So the real question isn't whether the mad king drowned. The real question is, was he insane or was he eliminated? Walk with me as I take you on another journey through the eyes of history. In 1864, a shy, impossibly handsome teenager inherited the throne of Bavaria. His name was Ludwig II of Bavaria. He was 18 years old. He had never ruled. He barely understood politics. But he believed in something far more dangerous than power. He believed in fantasy. Europe was shifting. Prussia was rising. War was brewing. Kingdoms were being swallowed. But Ludwig didn't dream of war rooms or treaties. He dreamed of knights, sworn maidens, and doomed heroes. He worshipped the operas of Richard Wagner, a controversial composer drowning in debts and scandal. Most kings would have kept their distance, but Ludwig saw himself in Wagner's tragic heroes. Therefore, he summoned Wagner to Bavaria, paid off his massive debts, installed him in luxury, and poured state funds into supporting him. His ministers were horrified. The treasury was strained. The public grumbled. But Ludwig didn't listen because, in his mind, he wasn't wasting money. He was building immortality. In 1866, Bavaria was dragged into war alongside Austria against Prussia. But Prussia crushed Austria. Therefore, Bavaria was forced into humiliating submission. Ludwig remained king in name, but real power shifted toward Berlin and eventually the newly proclaimed German Empire under Kaiser Wilhelm I. Imagine the humiliation. A crowned monarch reduced to ceremony, a sovereign ruler answering to another emperor. Ludwig felt power slipping through his fingers, so he decided to build something no empire could take from him. High in the Bavarian Alps, construction began on a structure that looked less like a fortress and more like hallucination. Neuschwanstein Castle, towers piercing the sky, interiors dripping in gold leaf, walls covered in scenes from Wagner's operas, Lohengrin, Tannhauser, Parsifal. But this wasn't a functioning castle. It was simply a stage set. Artificial caves, hidden corridors, a throne room without a throne. He wasn't ruling from it. He was escaping into it. And he wasn't finished. He built Linderhof Palace, intimate and decadent. He began Herrenchiemsee, a near replica of Versailles, an audacious attempt to rival France's most powerful symbol of monarchy. The cost exploded. Millions of marks, loans stacked upon loans, secret borrowing through intermediaries. His ministers warned him, but Ludwig refused restraint because this wasn't about architecture, it was about control. If he couldn't command armies, he would command beauty. If he couldn't dominate politics, he would dominate legend. But while he built fantasies in stone, his government began building a case against him. By the 1880s, Ludwig had withdrawn almost completely from public life. He avoided Munich. He traveled at night. He spoke to servants instead of ministers. He issued orders in writing, but rarely in person. Whispers began. The king is unstable. The king is mad. King is bankrupting Bavaria. But here's where deception enters. A group of ministers, led by Count von Holstein and others, secretly gathered evidence against him. They commissioned a psychiatric report. The lead physician was Dr. Bernhard von Gordon. He diagnosed Ludwig with paranoia and mental illness. But there was one problem. He had never properly examined the king. The diagnosis was based largely on testimonies from servants and political rivals. Therefore, on June 10, 1886, Ludwig was declared insane. He was deposed. No trial, no public defense, no chance to speak. Power had shifted quietly, efficiently, almost surgically. Was he unstable? Possibly. Was he politically inconvenient? Absolutely. On June 12, 1886, officials arrived at Neuschwanstein to arrest their king. But Ludwig initially had them detained. He still had loyalists. He still had authority. For a moment, it seemed the coup might fail. But hesitation cost him. Reinforcements arrived. His guards stood down. He was taken into custody and transported to Berg Castle on Lake Starnberg. He was no longer king. His uncle, Luitpold, became regent. The fairy tale monarch had fallen, but the final chapter would be darker than anyone expected. June 13, 1886. Ludwig requested an evening walk along Lake Starnberg. Dr. von Gordon accompanied him. They left around 6:30 p.m. By 8 p.m., they had not returned. Search parties went out. The lake was calm. The sky was heavy. Around 11:30 p.m., their bodies were found in shallow water, both dead. The official explanation: Ludwig drowned himself in a suicide attempt. The doctor tried to stop him. Both perished. But questions erupted immediately. Ludwig was known to be a strong swimmer. The water was shallow. There was no clear evidence of suicide. Some claimed he was shot trying to escape. Others believed a struggle occurred. Conspiracy theories multiplied. No full autopsy was conducted publicly. Therefore, mystery swallowed the truth. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Was it an accident? Convenient for governments that needed stability. The king who built illusions died in ambiguity. Here is where power mocks history. The government opened his unfinished castles to the public shortly after his death to repay debts. Visitors flooded in. Tourism exploded. Neuschwanstein became one of the most visited castles in the world. It would later inspire fantasy architecture across the globe. The obsession that nearly bankrupted Bavaria became its economic jewel. The Mad King became a romantic icon. The men who removed him faded into footnotes. Was Ludwig greedy? Not for gold, but for escape, for beauty, for a world where he answered to no one. Was he deceived? Possibly by ministers who weaponized psychiatry. Was he delusional? Or was he a monarch crushed between modern politics and medieval dreams? Power stripped him. Greed consumed him. Deception surrounded him. But his castles still stand, and perhaps that was his final victory, because in the end, the kingdom survived, the ministers ruled, but the world remembers the dreamer. Thank you guys for watching. Do well to like, comment, subscribe, and walk with me again through the eyes of history.